Ramily, welcome into a brand new episode of the Rams Report by Chat Sports, presented by PrizePicks. Guys, today we're answering and discussing what I think are some of the biggest questions remaining for this team after the draft and after their undrafted free agent signings. I think the Rams have had overall one of, if not the best off seasons of any team in the NFL, and I really feel that way. But I think there are still some questions left to answer. I think every team is facing questions at this point in the offseason. So we're going to break them down today, what I think are the biggest ones, and I'm going to attempt to answer them as well. But I want to hear from you guys before we get into this. What is your biggest question for the Rams in 2026? As we roll into the season, what's the one thing that's really eating at you? What are you wondering about right now? Let me know in the comments. And hey, I might use your question in another video in the future, just like this one. So make sure it's a really good one and get down there in the comments. As we roll into this one with our first question, can Emmanuel Forbes step up? I think this is especially on the mind right now, especially relevant, you might say, because just this past weekend, the Rams, as the deadline passed on May 1st to make fifth-year option decisions, decided to decline Emmanuel Forbes's. And just in case you're not familiar, Forbes, our corner number 3, likely coming into this season. We brought him in from Washington off the waiver wire. And despite this decline, I think he is absolutely still going to be a key piece for this team in 2026. They still need him this year, guys. Absolutely they do. Because just look at this depth chart right now. And I've talked about this before. And some of you guys have pointed this out in the comments as well, astute commenters. The depth at corner, obviously we've done some great things to address the top end. The trade for Trent McDuffie, I love it. Signing Jalen Watson, it's one of my favorite moves of the offseason so far. But beyond those guys, beyond Quentin Lake, it's a whole lot of Jags. That's the reality of the room right now. Emmanuel Forbes is the last, really solid piece that you feel good about being on the field. They need him to be the guy that he was in his best moments last year, and not the guy that he was at times in the playoffs last year. Not the guy who kind of disappeared from time to time. He needs to become more consistent in 2026 in a contract prove-it year with a lot on the line for him. It's a lot on the line for the Rams as well. If he's not great, it's going to be really hard for this team to go where they want to go and do the things that they want to do. We're going to talk more about some of the biggest questions for this team, but before we do, I got to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, guys, and that is America's #1 sports picks app, PrizePicks. Guys, if you love daily fantasy sports or you just want to make watching sports even more exciting than it already is, you have got to try out PrizePicks. And guys, it's a great time to get started with our friends over at PrizePicks too. With the NBA playoffs in full swing and the baseball season well underway, there's just no better place to cash in on all that action than PrizePicks. And it's so easy to play, guys. You just pick 2 to 6 players and you select more or less on their stat projections, whether you're picking from points, rebounds, assists, if you're going for basketball, if you're more of a seam head, you could choose from hits, home runs, and strikeouts. PrizePicks also has awesome social features, guys. If you don't feel like putting a lineup together today, that is totally okay. Just drop a follow on your friends or your favorite creators, including me and producer Mike. I'm on there at Jackson Durham with no spaces. He's Mike Jaraputo with no spaces. And you guys could drop a follow and see all of our lineups, including this one that we've got going for the playoff basketball action. Going with the more on Joel Embiid, going with the more on Naz Reid, and going with the more on Victor Wembanyama. So you guys could tail us on this lineup. You could fade us on this lineup. Whatever you do, just do it with our friends over at PrizePicks. And if you're a new user, download the PrizePicks app today and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with PrizePicks. Clickable link to download the app is in the comments and the description. All right, as always, thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. But let's get back to our discussion of the biggest questions facing this Rams team in 2026. I think the next of which is who is going to be the third wide receiver for this team. Who is wide receiver 3? This is something we've talked about a good deal on the channel already, but I think it's not for a good reason. Absolutely, because it's a huge question facing this team. I think a lot of us expected it to be answered on draft night with a pick of Mekhi Lemon, whether it was Jordan Tyson you wanted, Carnell Tate in a trade up, whoever it was. I think that was the expectation for a lot of Rams fans. That doesn't ultimately materialize. And while I think a lot of you guys as well have come around on the Ty Simpson pick and absolutely understand what the Rams were going for there, it doesn't mean that this isn't still an issue. Obviously, they drafted CJ Daniels, and he'll factor into the conversation, but he's one of several contenders for this role. And I think one that you absolutely have to have at the top of the list is somebody that Rams fans I know are not too fond of right now, Xavier Smith. Obviously, the fumble in the NFC Championship game was incredibly costly, but if you look last year at who stood out beyond Puka and beyond Devontae and the tight ends as far as receiving options went, Xavier Smith has to come up for you. He led all of the receivers we're going to talk about right here in production last season. A lot of that coming on deep opportunities, him kind of taking over what was expected to be Tutu Atwell's role in this offense. I think what the Rams had really hoped Tutu Atwell could become for a while there. Obviously, he didn't produce like a second-round draft pick or even Tutu Atwell's best seasons, but on limited work, you saw solid production from Xavier Smith, and that's got to be a huge part of the reason why the Rams elected to tender him and bring him back this year. But also in that conversation has to be Jordan Whittington. Whittington played a really solid role for them in 2024, smaller role in 2025, but still significant production for Jay Whitt behind Xavier Smith. Kanate Mupfield, rookie last season from the 7th round, absolutely has to factor in here as well. He had a lot of production early on before starting to taper off down the year, but he got big opportunities in the playoffs, even though he wasn't really able to cash in on one of the biggest ones that he got in the NFC Championship in a gotta-have-it moment. And then lastly, CJ Daniels, the rookie from Miami, who recently just changed his number to 6. We'll talk about all of those at the end of today's show. But I think CJ Daniels has to factor in here as well. We talked about limited production for him at the Power 5 level, but I do think he's somebody that the Rams, and John McKay, assistant general manager, said this on draft night. He, in his words, he's one of the last guys we felt could make an impact on this team in year one as well as in the future. So they do project a year one impact from CJ Daniels. Whether that's special teams or potentially as a competitor for receiver 3 remains to be seen, but I don't think you can have this conversation without throwing the rookie's name in there as well. But ultimately, guys, I think this comes down to 2 guys, Kanate Mupfield and Jordan Whittington. I think those are the 2 guys that the Rams right now are looking at, hey, we want you guys to step up. We want this to be your jobs. One of you 2 guys, go out there and take this role from Xavier Smith. Go out there and take opportunities from Xavier Smith. Show us that you deserve to be the third option in this, that we don't need to go out and sign a Jawan Jennings, that we don't need to go out and sign a Stephon Diggs, that you deserve to be this guy. And I think it's Jordan Whittington. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I think Jordan Whittington has the traits to be receiver 3 for this offense in 2026. I believe in this guy's talent. Much as I hate to say it sometimes because he's a Texas dude, but he's a Ram now, so I'm going to put that aside. But I do think Jordan Whittington can absolutely step up for this team and be that third option for us in 2026. I don't think it's going to be just him, but I do think he absolutely gets a much larger role than what we saw in 2025. Next question. Is Warren McClendon ready to be the 17-game starter at right tackle? This is one that we discussed a lot coming into the draft. And before that, when we got the report from Tony Pauline about Warren McClendon's extension being a very high priority for the Rams, obviously we have not seen that materialize to this point, but I do think it's still on the radar for this team. We've heard them talk about extensions being more of a late summer priority, so keep an eye on August for some of these moves. But in the right now, Warren McClendon is expected to, for the first time, step up as the full-time starter at right tackle in 2026. And a lot of Rams fans did not want that. A lot of Rams fans out there was a pretty vocal crowd wanted to see this team go offensive tackle with the 13th overall pick to fill in that right tackle spot, to bookend across from Alaric Jackson, to put Kevin Dotson next to, in their minds, a stronger piece. But this is what I told you guys would be the case and what we would learn on draft night, whether or not I was right or those guys were right. The Rams showed the confidence, though. I told you guys, hey, if they steer clear at 13, it is because they have confidence in Warren McClendon. That is the message that is screamed loud and clear, and that is exactly what we got. We got a Rams team that showed, hey, we believe in our offensive line as it is right now. That was the message across the roster, but offensive line stood out to me especially. We did not see this team go for offensive tackle in the first round. We did not see this team go for offensive tackle in the second round, and when they did choose to go for an offensive lineman in the draft, they went with Keegan Trost, who I love, by the way, but is a versatile piece. Someone who, in the minds of some evaluators, isn't likely to fill in and play his best football at tackle. I think he can absolutely play that role, but I do think the best football you're going to get from Trost at the next level is actually at guard. I think that's what his role will likely be in ideal situations. I do think he can fill in for you at tackle if injuries come up, but I do think Trost may end up being more of a guard. So it does feel like this pick screams to me, we trust McClendon. We believe in Warren McClendon and in the player that we saw him be in the regular season in 2025 when he had to fill in for Rob Havenstein, that they trust that guy. Because if they didn't, I don't think the rest of their offensive line moves this offseason would just be UDFA signings. I don't think if you don't trust your current starting five, you make literally no significant moves along the offensive line outside of Keegan Trost, who at the end of the day, despite being a third-round pick, it's hard to see a day one role for Trost in the same way we've talked about for a lot of our rookies. And I don't say that to denigrate him at all. It's just the strength of our roster as it currently is. Question number 4. Let's move on to this one. Who is returning punts for this team in 2026? This is one that I think a lot of Rams fans don't want to talk about, and a lot of Rams fans want to kind of bury. You want to pretend like it's not important. I know it's a special teams thing, but we learned last year exactly how important this is, and how if you don't focus on special teams and you pretend like it isn't one of the 3 phases of football, there's only 3 of them. If you try to act like this one doesn't matter, it will bite you in the ass in the biggest moments. And we saw that last year with the fumbles in the NFC Championship game. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. But this roster, I'm not going to lie to you, does not currently have a lot of great options to step up and replace Xavier Smith, who, hey, can't leave him out of this discussion. If we're talking about who's going to step up at punt returner next season, I know a lot of y'all would like for that to be the case. Maybe I would like for that to be the case, but I think he has to factor in here. Because again, he's the only guy with significant experience actually returning punts at the NFL level. Jordan Whittington could be in this conversation too, but even his experience at the NFL level as a returner is almost exclusively as a kick returner. He did a little bit of punt returning back at Texas. Jarquez Hunter returned some punts at Auburn. I think he had 16 career punt returns at Auburn. Maybe he's an option if they want to finally give him work on this team, but there seems to be something they're not trusting with him yet. He could have been his own conversation in this video about whether or not he's going to get a role as RB3, but I think, honestly, it's just even smaller than the receiver 3 conversation. And lastly, speaking of receivers, Brennan Presley probably has to factor into this conversation. And you may not be familiar with Brennan Presley. That's okay. You're still a real Rams fan. He is a depth wide receiver on this team right now out of Oklahoma State. He returned a lot of punts at Oklahoma State. He had 28 punt returns for 240 yards during his time at Oklahoma State at OSU. So maybe he also factors into this discussion. He hung on as a practice squad guy last year, might get an opportunity on the active roster this season. That would be the biggest key for him to actually getting a shot here would be, hey, you got to be on the active roster to be the punt returner. But this might be his key to getting onto the active roster, is showing a little bit more trustworthiness in punt return duty than Xavier Smith. But I think at the end of the day, the conversation that maybe you want to avoid here is it's very realistic that the Rams go back to Xavier Smith. It is very realistic and maybe level-headed of this Rams team to not make an emotional call here, to say, hey, Xavier Smith blew it in the NFC Championship game. Undeniably. But that doesn't put aside the fact that he was a solid punt returner every other opportunity that we asked him to be one for the last 2 seasons. How do you weigh that at the end of the day? If you're going into this conversation and you know you don't have a ton of great backup options beyond Xavier Smith, because look, Kyren Williams is not going to be your full-time punt returner. I know they subbed him in the NFC Championship game. That's not realistic. They're not putting that guy in that position. It's going to have to be one of the other options that we discussed. It's going to have to be a depth piece. And I think at the end of the day, might just end up being the same guy it was last year, as much as that'll irk a lot of Rams fans. But I think the Rams might just have to trust him to be the guy again because there aren't a lot of great backup choices. What do you think, though? Should Xavier Smith get a second chance to return punts for this Rams team after the calamity that was the NFC Championship game? Type Y for yes if you believe in second chances, if you believe in giving Xavier Smith another opportunity. Type N for no if you are firmly against the idea of that. And let's close out today with a little bit of news here. So the Rams rookies have their brand new numbers. If you're looking to do a jersey order, obviously new uniforms are out. If you wanted to pick up one of the rookie kits, now you can absolutely do that. CJ Daniels, he is the only one of our rookies who actually switched from his college number. Everyone else able to secure their college number. CJ is going to be wearing number 6. He wore 7 at Miami. Ty Simpson gets 15, which is interesting because Kanate Mupfield wore 15 last year. I have heard some rumors, don't quote me on this, he is maybe wearing 4, but I don't know yet. Keegan Trost takes 79. Some Rams fans are a little bit annoyed about this. I've seen that discussion online. Seems a little quick to move on from Rob Havenstein's number. I do understand that, but at the end of the day, it's a jersey number. I also wouldn't be surprised if Trost reached out to Havenstein and said, hey, would you mind if I wore this? And Rob said, absolutely not. Go ahead and do it. Again, I don't know that to be the case, but I wouldn't be shocked if that was, because I know Havenstein's still around that organization. Max Clare is going to keep 86, and Tim Keenan is going to rock 96. Let me know in the comments which of these rookies are you going to pick up a jersey for, and we will see you guys in the next one. As always, we appreciate you hanging out on this one, and as always, let's go Rams.